What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today, well look, I told you that the second we had Lorcana rules, I would be making a video to explain all about the lovely Lorcana rules to you. And now we have Lorcana rules, ladies and gentlemen, so I guess it's up for me to uphold my part of the bargain. We now have the rules for Lorcana, we know how Lorcana works, and I, for one, am very, very, very happy indeed. So, what's the game? It's not a game about fighting. There is fighting, although we obviously refer to it as challenges, we've known that for a while now, but it's not about fighting. It is about questing, and we finally answered one of the biggest questions we have had since they first started showing us games. What are these weird symbols? If we have a look at Gantu, for instance, Gantu's got 2 of the symbols, but Tinkerbell's only got 1. That is how many lore scraps you get when you go questing. Simple as that. Gantu, when you go questing, you get 2 scraps of lore, whereas Tinkerbell, when you go questing, you only get 1. And that is what the game is very much about. It is about running around, trying to get yourself lore pieces. You get 20 lore pieces, you win the game. So how does it actually all work? Well, let's take Gantu as a nice example of a card here, just because that one's to hand and we can see the whole card. And what we can see with Gantu is that we've got an 8-cost card, we have got a strength of 6, a willpower of 6, and a lore value of 2. That is to say, you get 2 pieces of lore when you go and do, the whole questing thing. And that, we finally have how a card actually works, and that is absolutely lovely. So how do we actually go? Well, in terms of building a deck, we have the deck construction rules. Your deck must have at least 60 cards in it. Now, I will say what we've got today is the overview rules. We don't have the exact perfect rules. Please bear that in mind. But we have the overview rules, and we are not told about a maximum deck size. So assume it is going to be 60 as a minimum with no maximum. You can only have 4 copies of any one card, but you can have as many of a particular character as you like. So if we take Mickey Mouse Wayward Sorcerer, you can only have 4 copies of that Mickey in your deck. But we previously saw the promo Mickey Mouse Brave Little Tailor. You could also have 4 copies of that one. You could have 4 copies of each of the Mickey, but you could not have more than 4 copies of any one Mickey. And you can only mix 2 inks together. Amber, Amethyst, Emerald, Ruby, Sapphire, and Steel. You can mix 1 or 2 of them, but you cannot have any more than 2. That is the way it goes. So those are your basic deck construction rules. Now, in terms of your resources, this is where some people are going to be happy and some people are going to be unhappy. You have your Inkwell. That is where you play your ink cards face down, and once during your turn, you can take any card that's got the little ink swirl around it, and you can play it down into your Inkwell as a resource. So if we take a look again at Mickey Brave Little Tailor, that has clearly got the little swirl, you can use it as ink. But if we were to look at, for instance, Hades, that is one of the promos that I showed you. It's coming in the gift box. It doesn't have that little swirl around it. Ergo, it cannot be used as ink. It's got to have that Inkwell icon around it in the top left-hand corner. It's got to be around the hexagon here. If it's not around the hexagon, you can't put it down as ink. What's important, though, once a card gets played down as ink, it cannot be used for the rest of the game. It is now just ink. No extra value. There's no 1 ink cards or 2 ink cards or anything like that. Every single card that you put down as ink is 1 ink for the rest of the game, and that is what you use to pay for your cards. Essentially, every turn you can use your ink to pay. So to play Gantu, you would have to rest 8 ink cards in your Inkwell, and you can add 1 per turn. You don't have to, and you might not have a card that you can add, but you can add 1 ink per turn. Presumably there's going to be a bunch of cards that let you add extra. That's the way card games work. Introduce a rule and then break it. But as it stands at the moment, you can put 1 card in your Inkwell per turn, as long as it has the Inkwell icon around the cost. And those are your resources you use to pay for the cards. What is really important here is that we do have a mulligan, and we have to have a mulligan just purely because of the way the game has been designed. Now, they're referring to it as altering your starting hand, but basically at the start of the game, you draw 7 cards, and that is your opening hand. If you don't like your opening hand, what you can do is put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck, without revealing them, and then draw until you've got 7. So you don't get a brand new hand, you just get to replace any cards you don't like. What is important is that there appears to be no downside to mulliganing. You draw an opening hand of 7, any cards you don't want you put to the bottom of your deck, you then draw until you've got 7 again, i.e. you're not going to redraw the cards you just put at the bottom, you then shuffle your deck and get rolling. So yes, there is a mulligan, yes, it is very generous, but bearing in mind you've got to have enough cards to put into your Inkwell in order to get rolling, we had to have a mulligan system. This game needed a mulligan for that exact reason. Now, in terms of types of cards, it's exactly like we thought with one extra. We've got characters, they go on quests and do challenges, more on them in a moment. We've got items that stay in play and can be used every turn. And we've got actions, which are one-shot deals. You play them, you use them, you move on. What we didn't know about before were song cards. Song cards like One Jump Ahead is one they've shown us here. It is exactly the same as we see action cards, one-shot deals, pay for them, etc. However, they can be played for free. So One Jump Ahead, any character with a cost of 2 or more can tap to sing this song for free. Which is kind of cool, honestly, ladies and gentlemen. That's kind of cool. Basically, you don't have to pay for it, and that's a good thing. Also, you'll notice One Jump Ahead puts the top card of your deck into your Inkwell face down and exerted. That is getting extra ink. I told you there would be cards that get you extra ink. Or putting a random card in your Inkwell does seem a little bit awkward. So that's how you make your deck. When you set up, you grab 7 cards, you can alter if you like, decide who's going first, and then we roll. Now, in terms of the phases, it's a lot like you would expect. At the beginning of your turn, you ready all of your cards, any that are exerted get unexerted. You set, the start of turn effects happen, and then you draw. You can see what they've done there with ready, set, draw. And then during your main phase, you can do any of the following. You can put a card in your Inkwell, but remember it's got to have the Inkwell symbol, and that is limited to once per turn. You can play as many cards as you like, as long as you can pay for them. You can activate an item, as long as you can do what you need to. So we've previously seen Magic Mirror, where you have to tap it and pay 4 in order to draw a card. So you can do Magic Mirror every turn, but you've got to actually tap it and pay 4 in order to do so. Items are not necessarily free, you have to do what it says on them. You can play a character ability that doesn't require it to be tapped, because remember, they come into play and you can't do anything with them. The way they put it in the game is you've got to wait for the ink to dry. And if you have a character that was in play during your set phase, again, you've got to wait for the ink to dry, you can't use a character the turn you play it, you can choose to either use an ability on, which requires it to tap. If you've got to tap the character, you can't do anything else. But if you don't want to use a tap ability, Elsa would be a nice example. Elsa does have a tap ability. So if you tap Elsa, you cannot then use her for anything else. She has been tapped or exerted. And you can either challenge or go on a quest. And this is the core gameplay loop of Lorcana. When you go on a quest, you tap the character to get lore equal to their lore value. Remember, you have to get to 20 lore, and when you do, you win the game. Job's a good un. So you can do that. Or you can challenge a character, but you can only challenge exerted characters. And that's very important, because it means when you quest with a character, you get some lore, yeah, you're closer to winning the game, but you're then exerted, which means that a character you've used for questing is one that your opponent will be able to challenge on their next turn. And this is the basic back and forth of the game. You can use your characters for questing and just ignore challenges altogether, But if you do that, you can leave your characters vulnerable, and then your opponent can take them all out, and then they've got a board set up, and then they can do their questing without any real defiance from you. And that is the real kind of decisions to be made on a turn-to-turn basis. Do you challenge or do you quest? The answer is, depends on the game, depends on your opponent's board. This part of the game, incidentally, literally Keyforge. This is Keyforge. Having a bunch of characters that you can either use to go and get some stuff to get you closer to winning the game, or challenge other characters to stop your opponent, that is literally the main gameplay loop of Keyforge. Like, very literally exactly Keyforge. Now, the resource system is very different, and Keyforge had a thing where you had to get 6 amber, and then you had to wait until next turn to forge a key. So rather than getting a specified number, you had to get a much smaller number 3 times, but you had to wait a turn to forge a key, which meant that your opponent would have time to try and take your amber away, etc. So in that way, it's different, but having characters that can either get stuff to get closer to winning the game, or fight, that is Keyforge. Now, in terms of damage, you literally just, each character does damage to the other. So if we go back to my Gantu and Tinkerbell example, Gantu's got a strength of 6, so we'll deal 6 damage to Tinkerbell, who only has a willpower of 4, so she will be banished. Tinkerbell, however, will only deal 2 to Gantu, and given that Gantu's got a willpower of 6, that means that Gantu will stay around, but the damage stays on. That is very, very important. It does not get healed between turns, which is really important because it does make challenges more important as the game goes along, and it does mean challenges with smaller characters are more important. So, rounding up then, here are the basics. You build a deck of at least 60 cards, only 4 of any one copy, 1 or 2 inks only. At the beginning of the game, you shuffle up. You draw an opening hand of 7 cards, but you do get a chance to alter by putting as many cards as you like on the bottom of your deck and redrawing until you've got 7. And then during your turn, you can do any of the following things as you like after you draw a card. Oh, I haven't said this yet, so let me make it explicit now. On the first turn, I'm assuming it means the first person going first doesn't draw a card. There's always a bit of a downside to going first. Here it is, the player going first doesn't draw a card. And then during your turn, you can put 1 card, if it's got the Inkwell symbol, into your Inkwell. You can play as many cards as you like, activate items, both of these as long as you can pay for them, play a character that doesn't require it to be tapped, and with a character that was in play during your set phase, because they've got summoning sickness or you got to wait for the ink to dry, you can either go on a quest to gain lore, challenge an exerted character, or use an ability that requires you to be tapped. That's it. That's the basic rules of Lorcana. The mana system is a little bit like Magic. The core gameplay loop is very much like Keyforge. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to know what you think about this. I was excited about this game. I remain excited about this game. But I want to know what you think. So let me know in the comment section, would you? Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. That's where we talk about Lorcana and a bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wasi Plays.